It was instead a fluke secretly engineered by the Russian government because they're evil and they hate our values. Well, so far there has not been much proof that any of this actually happened, okay, any proof at all. But we did just learn tonight from the Washington Post that President Trump, brace yourselves, sat with Vladimir Putin at dinner during the G20 summit recently, which may be a felony. We'll be following that story. But in any case, all of this Russia narrative has utterly changed the rules here in Washington, maybe forever. The Russians are now our chief enemy. Americans who have contact with them, any contact at all, are committing treason. That's the subtext. Here it is, explicitly stated. This is Congressman Mike Quigley, Democrat of Illinois, explaining the new rules.
I think what we're learning with the Trump Jr. meeting is when you meet with any Russians, you're meeting with Russian intelligence and therefore President Putin.
In other words, there is no innocent contact with Russia. It doesn't exist. Any meeting with any Russian is a meeting with Putin himself. Okay, what does that mean for Hillary Clinton? In 2010, while she was Secretary of State, serving as Secretary of State, Clinton publicly opposed sanctions on the Russian government. At the very same time, her husband, Bill Clinton, was paid $500,000 to deliver a speech in Moscow to a financial firm set to benefit from the removal of the sanctions his wife opposed. Bill Clinton was even thanked later by Vladimir Putin for that speech. Now, since we're doing the math here on this show, we can tell you that Bill Clinton's payday was 10 times greater than what General Michael Flynn received for a speech in 2015. Does that mean that Bill Clinton colluded 10 times as much as General Flynn colluded? Maybe we'll find out at his treason trial, presided over by Maxine Waters and the rest of Washington's new red baiters. Maybe Michael Starr Hopkins will be there too. He's a Democratic strategist. He joins us now.
Thanks for
Mr. Hopkins, thanks for coming on. So by the new standards, which I should just say in case our viewers are not detecting sarcasm in my voice,
just a little bit,
I think are appalling and stupid. But those are the standards. I don't make the rules. Democratic members of Congress now do, and MSNBC. And the new rule is any contact with Russia is contact with Vladimir Putin himself, and therefore treason. What do you make of Hillary Clinton and her husband Bill Clinton's contact with the Russians while she was Secretary of State?
Well, I don't think that it was problematic at all. Let's look at what happened. Oh. Well, let's look at this in an honest way. It's not the contact itself that was problematic. It's the fact that Flynn lied. Bill Clinton gave a speech in Moscow, and that in and of itself isn't illegal. It's the fact that Michael Flynn lied. Bill Clinton admitted that he gave that speech. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State at the time.
And I appreciate that was a game effort. But Mike Flynn lied to members of the administration who then told the truth to the American public.
And he lied on his security clearance.
Okay,
document.
But that was immediately rectified by the administration you think should be driven from office because of their contact with Russia.
When you say immediately, what do you mean? It was only after he was confronted with lying on that document.
Confronted by the people he worked for in the Trump administration. So I'm not defending Trump. I'm merely saying, but by the standards you've set up just a second ago, that doesn't make any sense. So let's get to the core of it, not who lied or who told the truth, but who did what. If meetings with the Russian government and a public position against sanctions is prima facie evidence of disloyalty to your country, and that's what Democrats are saying.
That's not what Democrats are saying.
Well, then what are they saying?
Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and she, on multiple occurrences, met with the Russian government. That in and of itself is not a crime. She was a public governmental official.
Absolutely. It's her job to do that.
Exactly. What becomes problematic is when you have Donald Trump Jr. meeting with the Russians, or when you have Paul Manafort meeting with Russians and not disclosing that. It's the lies that get people in trouble, not the meeting.
So it's not the meeting. So it's actually Congressman Quigley was himself lying when he said that any meeting with Russians is in fact a betrayal of your country in a meeting with Vladimir Putin. But what do you mean?
Well, that's not specifically what the congressman said, but I get your point.
I can read the quote for you. He said, meeting with Russians is meeting with Russian intelligence and therefore Putin. I think that's a verbatim quote.
I think that there was a couple more words in there, but I get your point.
Okay,
Democrats should be careful. Democrats should be careful when they're talking about meeting with Russians and aligning that with a crime. I'm a criminal defense attorney by nature, and crimes are very specific things.
Okay, then how about this, an immoral act? You will concede that is the textbook definition of McCarthyism, isn't it? It's guilt by association. It's saying you know someone who knows someone else,
this
and therefore
Republican
you're
Party,
immoral.
and especially this president, has been pushing for the last at least 18 months. This idea that we can demagogue all different kinds of groups, and that somehow makes it legitimate just by the action of our president becoming president.
When the ranking Democrat in the House, Nancy Pelosi, makes that case, when Maxine Waters of Los Angeles makes that case, when Mike Quigley of Illinois make that case, somehow it's the Trump administration. Okay, let's leave partisanship behind just really quick because I want to get to the core story.
Perfect.
What do you make of that? A sitting Secretary of State is married to a man, himself a former president, who is soliciting money from foreign governments with whom the United States has a contentious relationship. Would you have felt comfortable if, I don't know, Donald Rumsfeld's wife was taking money from foreign governments? Or would you be happy now if the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson's wife, were taking money from Russia? Wouldn't you say that's a little over the top?
Well, let's make sure that we're getting this right. Bill Clinton himself was not taking money from Russia, the government. He gave a private speech in Russia. But, you know, I'll acknowledge what you say. I don't like the idea of politicians, whether they be Democrat or Republican in this environment, giving speeches in Russia
I don't either. And I didn't like it when Mike Flynn did it, though he was not an office holder at the time. But I guess you're conceding something that kind of blows up the entire Russia story, which is because not every person with Cyrillic letters in his name is working for Vladimir Putin, and you just conceded that. Thank you for just saying something normal.
When Democrats have gone to Russia or given speeches in Russia, had conversations with Russians, we're honest about it. If Republicans would stop lying, if Paul Manafort, if Michael Flynn, if Jared Kushner, if Donald Trump Jr. would stop lying, then we could create a situation where we would have a reason to trust that there's an honest discourse going on. That's not where we're at.
I mean, I'm not even going to contest that. I mean, I think it's a silly point, but I just want to get to the core point.
Come on, that matters, though. When you have the senior members of the campaign lying about meeting with Russians.
I'm much less interested in the Trump administration and much more interested in Russia, the country, which has a ton of nuclear weapons, and our relationship with them. And so I just want to establish, and we'll end it really quick, but that it is okay as an American citizen, a faithful American, to talk to Russians and to have opinions that maybe aren't the same opinions as the majority. So, like, you could be against sanctions, as Hillary was. You could meet with Russians, as her husband did, even if they have ties to Vladimir Putin. And that doesn't make you a disloyal American. Is that what you're saying?
No, yes, that is what I'm saying. You could meet with Russia and have conversations, especially as Secretary of State or as former president, as long as you're honest about those. But let's not pretend that that's what the Trump administration has done.
What they did is totally different.
Yes,
they
they've
took
lied.
Less money
They've
from the
lied.
Russians.
They've broken federal codes twice. Obstruction of justice, foreign donations, soliciting foreign donations. That's a real thing.
It's Groundhog Day here on the show. But I'm glad we got to that. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, for more on the Clinton family's interaction with Russia, a big deal or not, we're joined by Fox senior political analyst Brit Hume. Brit, is this a big deal?
Well, we knew about this. This is not new news. We've known about this for some time, and I think it's fair to suggest that when this came out, along with so much else about Hillary and Bill Clinton and the way that they raised money and all the problems with the Clinton Foundation, that those things went into the mix of public opinion, and the result was that Hillary Clinton lost the election. Now, we can't draw a straight line between any one revelation and the fact that she lost the election, but that's what was out there. So it's, you know, it may have helped prevent her from becoming president. So I think, you know, the fact that it was out there is probably a good thing. Obviously, there wasn't the to-do made about that at the time that there is about these Russia contacts. And it isn't just the fact that the Trump team didn't come out and inform the country of all of these things right away. That always creates a bad story and an appearance of something being covered up. But it's also, as you point out, here she is making policy decisions, and here he is being paid extravagantly by people who have an interest in those decisions. That is a conflict of interest. It is a howling conflict of interest, and I think it was a point against her in the election.
I think it was. What do you make of the fact, this is being reported by the Washington Post tonight, that our president may have betrayed his country by sitting next to, in close physical proximity to, in any case, Vladimir Putin himself at a multilateral dinner?
It's perfectly fine for the Post to report that. What I object to so much of the time is the breathless and extravagant coverage that these events get. And I find myself repeatedly by saying, that's interesting, but it's not that big a deal. I mean, time and time again, that's my reaction. So I think that what we have is a story that has been interesting, worth reporting, worth investigating, but to date, hopelessly overblown.
The second someone can explain explain what the crime is, I'll be really interested in this story.
Yeah, of course, when they start talking about, a cover-up, you have to have, a cover-up, collusion.
But just tell me what the crime is. I mean, I'm willing to believe anything, by the way. I don't work for the Trump people.
You heard that.
They don't send me money. So if you tell me what's the allegation, I will get deeply
interested. Well, your previous guest was talking about obstruction of justice, right? I think we're a long way from being able to say that.
I think we might be. Okay, one more thing. So the Republican-controlled Senate apparently failed in its efforts to repeal Obamacare, and the president has signaled it's time to sit back and let that law, Obamacare, fail on its own. Here's what he said.
I'm certainly disappointed. For 7 years, I've been hearing repeal and replace from Congress, and I've been hearing it loud and strong. And then when we finally get a chance to repeal and replace, they don't take advantage of it. And I think we're probably in that position where we'll just let Obamacare fail. We're not going to own it. I'm not going to own it. I can tell you the Republicans are not going to own it. We'll let Obamacare fail, and then the Democrats are going to come to us, and they're going to say, how do we fix it? How do we fix it?
I don't think that's a realistic scenario. If you have both houses of the Congress and the White House, and your party has been elected on a promise to fix this law which was so unpopular, and you don't do that, and the negative consequences of that law take full effect, the idea that you can escape responsibility for that, I think, is politically nuts.
What would that look like? That would require the White House and the Congress to sit back and watch
the continuing collapse of choice in the exchanges. People unable to get premiums rising to astronomical levels, with continuing growth in the co-payments and the minimums that you have to pay, and the thing unraveling. And I don't think it's politically tenable, particularly if you have control of all parts of the government, to let that happen and pretend you can blame somebody else.
Someone else set the house on fire. I'm letting it burn.
Right. Well, the other thing is, who would you then blame? The people who are in charge when the law passed? Seems to me they've already gotten blamed. They got turned out of power, right? Their party got turned out of power. They lost control, first the House and then the Senate. Now these people are in power, and they can say, well, look, this was their problem, we didn't fix it, so don't blame us. No, it doesn't work that way, and it won't. And and Tucker, make no mistake about that, if they don't find a way somehow, and I don't know what it would be at this stage, to turn this around and get something done on this, this will be a colossal failure, historic failure, because the reasons that are being given by these members for not being willing to vote for this, we have members of the Senate now who are prepared to keep a vote to repeal Obamacare from even coming to the floor. Now, they're free to vote against it. They want to block its consideration. These are people, in some instances, who voted for that very repeal within the last 2 years. Right. I mean, I don't see how this is politically defensible on their part.
I don't either. Pretty human. Thanks.
Thank you, Tucker.
Up next, a Minneapolis woman called the police to report a possible crime and somehow wound up dead herself, shot by a police officer. What happened? We've got some breaking news on that. We're going to fill you in a minute. Plus, a man who murdered a U.S. soldier just became a multi-millionaire courtesy of the Trudeau government in Canada. Just ahead, we'll talk to a soldier who was gravely wounded while fighting that man. Stay tuned.
Tucker Carlson.